One of those days you have to demonstrate your talents and sing or something from your choir.
Well, you know, the I
Bob.
I lead services periodically at the Rambam synagogue. So
I know, it's great. It's great. Huh? Hi, Bob.
Hi, Lev. How you doing, Ruvain?
Hi.
Hi, Bob.
Okay.
We had an extra session today, I guess you might have seen it. Reuven, Shai, Greg, Doug, myself, David. We had a little recording I sent to you guys. I don't know if you had a chance to see it yet.
I saw part of it. How come I wasn't invited to come over?
Well, this is our first kind of live, like America has this five circle, like five ladies. In this case, we're the five perplexed guys. And the first thing, as you know, the format is a little bit rough because, I mean, it's the first time we tried, so the sound, I think, is a little bit like backgroundish, not like you can see very clearly. Like when we talk.
It was good. It was good. I understood you completely.
Oh,
Where's
okay.
David? Did he disappear?
David? Oh, no, I think he had a meeting today, but he was in our meeting today.
Right, I saw him.
So
what was the subject matter? What was the subject matter?
The subject, you didn't get the link. I think you're on the perplex list on emails. Probably didn't have a chance to see it yet.
Oh yeah, I missed it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, the subject there was no subject. We end up talking about the anti-Semitism in the world today, and we try to explore the roots and reasons. Some of that was what Bob gave us an idea, because he asked for a particular topic to discuss. So we kind of impromptu did it, and we deviated a little bit off and on. We had a little bit. We didn't make it too serious. We had a little bit of light side, and so we just talk about it, and we decided to do it every so often, and try kind of evolve it to make normally in a really professional production, they'll probably edit it and we'll make like introduction with the stars spinning and a cast of things and like a movie. Well, we didn't do any of that. We just did it raw the way it came out. And hopefully as we go, we just improve ourselves. But we need to have a topic more specifically and talk about this topic on this Tuesday and that topic. There are several ideas, but you see, as you watch that clip, you will see. And if you check on your emails, Daniel, if you still don't have it, I'll resend you another link. I have your email, no?
Daniel, I think so. I've been mostly communicating with you on WhatsApp.
Yeah, but I think I sent an email. So anyway, that's what the topic, and that kind of expanded what Bob suggested. Bob sent me an email with a proposal, and we said, let's do it, and that's what the tape came out. But now we'll go back to Bob now to you can bring up your topic that you wanted to discuss.
Okay, so I'll just give a few of my opinions, and then Ruvain, I know you will definitely have opinions. So, and Lev, and I'll get to know you, Daniel. You can also speak up whenever you want. Last week we spoke about the difference between speech and action, and how the American or the Western view is that you can say whatever you want as long as you don't do it. And we learned that in Jewish thought, that speech and action really are bundled together. They're bundled together as one concept. And if you're going to say something and it's intended for an action that's not a good action, then for sure.
Oh, here's Bob Kazan, Bob Khazan. Hi, Bob. Good to see you. Bob is in New York, in Queens, right? Long Island.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Yeah, hi, Lev. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you. And here's Howard just logging in from Northern Atlanta. All right. Okay, we're going to introduce. Let's go back to Bob. He was in the middle of the topic of today. Go ahead, Bob.
So, Bob, last week we talked about the connection between speech and action, and we decided that in the Jewish viewpoint of the world, speech and action are one. So anyway, today let's look at the Jewish concept of mercy, and particularly the concept of what mercy should we show to other nations. And obviously, I'm relating that to what's going on in Gaza and the world's attitude towards that we are not showing enough mercy towards another nation. So I think we should talk about that. And I'm going to give examples of mercy in Jewish thought so we can have an idea of what mercy means. And I particularly am going to give my opinions through these examples. And then you guys can all tell me why I'm wrong. I'll begin with Psalm 23. And in Psalm 23, it says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And that was written by King David when he was running from Saul for his life. And let's see, I'm reading my phone as I do this. What King David means about surely you will show mercy, King David is saying that God will not forsake him. And therefore we can interpret mercy as we should never forsake each other. And remember that King David is speaking specifically about himself. Then we can look at Psalm 110. And in Psalm 110, it says, he, meaning God, works judgment upon the nations. And think about the word nations. God works judgment upon the nations, heaping up bodies, crushing heads far and wide. And the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. And this suggests, this psalm, that God will, in certain circumstances, abandon other nations. So we're building a case here where God will not abandon us, but will abandon other nations. Now let's look at the 13 attributes of God, which he said to Moses on Mount Sinai after the Egel, after the golden calf. And in this, God says to Moses that whenever you recite the 13 attributes, I will forgive you. And we learn from this that the 13 attributes, which represents not the essence of God, but the action of God. In other words, what God does. So mercy here represents withholding harsh judgment from us, specifically from us, that God will never judge or deal with us harshly. So far we have learned that mercy means to help us, capital US, to help us and not to judge harshly, but we don't see anything in terms of mercy towards other nations. So let's look at the battles of Joshua. And that I assume would be in Joshua from prophets. But I actually have a quote from Devarim. When the Lord your God brings you into the land, which will be under Joshua, that you are entering to take possession of it. And when the Lord your God gives them, the Canaanites, over to you, and you defeat them, you must devote them to complete destruction. From the Hebrew word harem. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. So what we're learning here is that God says you should show no mercy to the nations. It's clear. It's not something open to a lot of rabbinic interpretation. And I'm going to go into one more quote from Torah. I'll turn it over to you after that. And this is also a very famous statement. I don't know if this is in Devarim. I didn't write it down, but it says, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons. And I'm sure you all know that from Torah anyway. It says that if you turn your sons away from me to serve other gods, then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you and he would destroy you quickly. So that's kind of interesting. Does that mean that there's no mercy here, that God will show no mercy to the Jewish people? But if you look at that statement from Torah closely, you will notice it's written in the singular, not in the plural. In other words, if an individual Jew goes astray, such as is written in this pasuk, then God will turn away from us and will show us no mercy. So I'll just say one more comment on this, that in the ancient world, there was a dichotomy. There were gods who were cruel and there were gods who showed mercy, but it was on Mount Sinai that God revealed that he has both qualities. He has a quality of mercy and he has a quality of anger. And yet it seems in the many examples that I have looked at and I'm presenting today that the mercy is reserved for the Jewish people, the anger reserved for the nations of the world. And that could be a guidepost towards how we personally as Jews should respond to the October 7 horrors and what we should be doing in Gaza. So that's my spiel. And now you're all free to agree with me, which I'm sure you do, or the few of you that may disagree with me. Go ahead. Leib, you want to start?
Well, I can just make a small comment. I think if I may slightly modify my thoughts, I think God has attributes of mercy and justice, not mercy and anger. It's a gevura and hesed, and the mercy and the attribute of justice is similar to attribute and anger as both being opposite to mercy. But justice has in it, like Zohar is teaching us, that all 10 sefirot have in them each of the components. In other words, mercy has 9 other sefirot inside mercy, including justice, and justice in it has also all sefirot, including mercy. For example, when the surgeon operates on a patient, it's not anger, it's justice. He has to cut it, and it hurts, but he's doing it because he's merciful to help the person. So just one thought came to me. Anger is a little bit strong term, but justice, it's more merciful than just anger. And then relating to what you just started with Gaza, the whole world, United Nations that I'm watching, unfortunately, some we all do, says that we are retaliating like eye for an eye, like they did it up. We're not doing of anger. We're doing justice. We're just trying to protect ourselves from that's not happening again. It's not because we hate them. We would rather live in peace. So there's no anger involved, although some people can say fathers and mothers who lost their children and war soldiers, of course, I'm sure they're angry. But overall, our nation, as I see it, is not angry. And our nation wants justice. And then with justice comes mercy. So it's just my little thought, you guys. What do you think?
Matter of survival. These people are an existential threat. The ones trying to kill us. The Torah specifically says if somebody you know is going to kill you, you need to rise up early before they get up and kill them before they come after you. Rebbe actually said that if you do that, you're actually doing them a favor, because once they see you're ready to kill, they'll back off. Well, I don't know if Hamas will back off. These people are psychotic. But
yes, Bob,
so
Kazan, for information, since you kind of didn't know, Ruben just spoken. He is a Chabadnik, so that's why he just quoted the rabbis, obviously. So you can tell by him, other than his beard, that he's Chabadnik. Go ahead, Bob.
So Ruben, you're saying that basically the world's cry about Israel's behavior is wrong, and there's no obligation to show mercy.
no, there's none at all. In fact, there was a good article in the Wall Street Journal by a legal expert who went through all these arguments about proportional response. There's a whole theory of just war that was ratified by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages, but it's pretty much been taken up by most of the Western countries. The idea that if you have to go to war is sometimes necessary. They pretty much abandoned the Jesus idea that, turn the other cheek all the time. Sometimes wars are necessary. When there is a war, you want to minimize civilian casualties and get the thing over with as soon as possible. But sometimes civilians get in the way. And if it's necessary to pursue your aims and end the threat to your country, then you may go in and do whatever you have to do, even if there will be some civilian casualties. There's simply no justification by any kind of theory or by the Geneva Convention that we have to back off just because Hamas is stuffing civilians right around them. We're entitled to go in and do what we have to do. And all this other stuff about proportional response, it's just as a lot of people want to see Israel destroyed. And unlike Hamas, who just come right out and say, we want to kill you and get rid of you, the UN and its stooges, they try to come up with fancy, westernized intellectual phrases, which still mean we want to see you destroyed. It's just they're too ashamed to come right out and say it, but ultimately what they're looking for is for Israel to be weakened and destroyed, and we have to ignore it. It's all the stuff they're saying about proportional response is just nonsense. It's not based on anything legal. It's not based on the Geneva Convention. It's not based on anything except a bunch of leftists who hate Israel and love Hamas and have some loony idea about this revolutionary changes in the world, which they think are going to improve the world. I don't even know if they think it'll improve it. I think they just like the idea of revolution and messing everything up and tearing things down. They have nothing to replace it with, but yeah, it's all just it's a fancy way of saying the same thing Hamas is saying, that we want to see you destroyed. Two-state solution is another euphemism for destroy Israel. It's just we have to ignore it and do what we have to do.
I think that we are compelled to use force in this instance. But I think what Bob laid out in his presentation and is trying to get us to think about is, is when is mercy appropriate? And I think one of the ways I would think about it is when we think of God as the Baal HaRachamim, God is the master of mercy. Okay, God is in charge when it comes to mercy. And if we look, and we're supposed to be imitating God, we're supposed to be like God. And how do we do that? By looking at Hashem's behavior in the Torah. For example, against Amalek, there was no mercy because mercy would have been dangerous. Against the when conquering the land with Yehoshua, there were certain battles that we had to kill everyone, and so I think there are certain rules that Hashem followed. So I think when there's justice is the opposite. Sometimes we have to be strict with justice when the person is so deserving of it, like with the Hamas in this instance. But there are other times where we have to try to look at the positive elements. If we could save the children, maybe get them into schools where they're not going to be educated to hate. If we can somehow save people who aren't indoctrinated or whatever, I don't know, but I think it's a valid question that we have to try to answer. And if we can do this without bloodshed, like when I pray now, I pray that their nefarious designs are disappear, not blood. It could be through some sort of revelation. I mean, I don't know if it's possible, but maybe if God somehow reveals himself to these people and they can do tshuva somehow. I don't see it. I don't know how we could get them to do tshuva, but in any case, if it could be done, like it says in the Masor, kulam ke'ashan tichleh, they should disappear. The wicked should disappear like smoke. We don't want them to be, bleeding and suffering, and we want their nefarious designs. We were forced into this, so we have no choice now. But we want their nefarious designs to disappear, not them.
Daniel, what is our Torah obligation to these children who are being raised to be terrorists? What is our Torah obligation in your view?
To save them somehow. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if if they keep indoctrinating them, then it's maybe by executing this war, we can give them a chance with a different leadership.
Is it our obligation to give them a chance or to give them new leadership?
I think at this point I agree with Reuven. At this point I agree with Reuven. We have no choice but to use force. It's pikuach nefesh. We have to save lives.
I want to add something.
I'm sorry, I'm not being mean. I'm just throwing out ideas to make discussion.
Two family members who are leftists say, well, if you go and push too hard, you're going to make a new generation of terrorists. They're thinking, these people are being trained right now to be terrorists, with or without us. I mean, the only chance we have to get rid of that sickness in the mind is to get in there, break up that whole thing, and put some control over what kind of education system they have. The other thing is, like, are they going to hate us? Sure, they'll hate us. Until Mashiach comes, there's going to be hatred between Islam and the Jews. But like I said, it's like the battle against the Sisera and his army. And it ends with Sisera is killed, his army's scattered, and it says the land had peace for 40 years. I'll be happy to settle for peace for 40 years. I don't care what these little brats think of us. If the new generation of brats turns into big brats, we'll have to go after them too. Matter of our survival.
I can also add to Bob's point, what he just mentioned to Reuven, is like, I personally feel sometimes that we Jews, we tend to be sometimes very intellectual, and we're trying to explain ourselves. It's almost coming the audience with a Hitler and trying to tell him, listen, let's have a cup of coffee and talk about it, and you can get it how wrong you are. And what example I would say, on the long term, philosophically speaking, every time I see the interviews on YouTube of Israeli, Bennett, whoever talking to the CNN or BBC anchor, and Bennett explains logically what he has to do, and I look at the completely void eyes of BBC anchor, and when he finished answering, he just gave, but don't you think that you're losing internet? Completely missing the point. So I think we're too verbose and lengthy, and I'm prime example of that. What I would say, here's an example, the airplane, I think Reuven, you and I might spoke earlier about this, airplane is diving into Manhattan. Was it 2 minutes until impact, or to Paris? There's 200 people on a plane, men, children, babies, all that. And the 2 hijackers in the cabin is diving down. There's 2 minutes. And then F-15 is circling around airplane. He's calling his buddy to say, what do you want me to do? Should I blow it out of the sky? Well, if he doesn't do it, he only has 2 minutes, not 2 months to negotiate and figure something. 2 minutes, literally, he's already coming. And if F-15 doesn't shoot him out of the sky, it will be a nuclear explosion, and Manhattan and the whole state, New York, will be vaporized with millions and millions of people. And I can see the argument will be, but there's innocent people on the plane. You can't shoot it.
It's called lesser of evils. Let's cut to the chase. It's called lesser of evils.
And if the guy,
you have 2 choices, one leads to 10,000 deaths or 200 deaths, one leads to 1 million deaths.
And if
they're inevitable, you do the less deaths. That's it.
If I was a pilot, I will push the button, blow it out. And if I happen to be a passenger of this plane and they ask my opinion, I'll say blow it out, including myself. But if he does that and saves all these people, as Reuven just said, there'll be still people in Manhattan talking about that's very inhumane. What about disproportional response? You killed 2 people and 200 innocent civilians.
So Reuven,
you're talking about that, the Bennett talking to these leftist reporters. And you have to understand something very well. First of all, Benjamin Disraeli said, never complain, never explain. That was one of his political principles. The second thing is this book, which I talked about before, by William Nichols, who's a Christian writer. He's a philosophy professor in Canada, called Christian Anti-Semitism. He makes a very good point near the end of the book that he said it's really impossible to talk somebody out of their anti-Semitism logically, because if they came to it logically, yes, then you could talk them out of it logically. But they didn't come to it logically. They came to it emotionally. So logic's not going to work. That's the story of, there's probably apocryphal, the story of Napoleon going to a little town and his marches, and they came across this wall, and there was bullseyes and an arrow right in the middle of each one. And he wanted to know who's this unbelievable archer who can put an arrow right in the middle of each bullseye. And they found this little 10-year-old kid. And Napoleon asked, how'd you do it? He says, well, first I shoot the arrow, then I draw the bullseye around. That's what anti-Semitism is. The anti-Semitism is emotional. It comes first. Then they make the bullseye. Oh, disproportional response. Oh, 2-state solution. They're poor oppressed people, like the head of the UN said, you have to look at the context, all that other nonsense. It's the arrow goes in first, and then the bullseye gets drawn around it. All the arguments are idiotic and silly and illogical, but these anti-Semites, they came to it not logically, they came to it emotionally, so we just have to accept it. I'd stick with what the Israelis said. Don't complain, never complain, never explain.
Well, I'm disappointed that the Israeli government seems to feel in the United Nations and to the United States that they have to explain what they're doing. I think they should take your advice and just simply stop explaining and saying, this is the right thing to do. This is not an evil thing we're doing, and no more explanation. That would be nice.
I have a quote here that I happened to looked up yesterday for unrelated reason, but it might illustrate what Bob and Reuben just said. And this is in Tanakh, happened to be in the first chapter. It's in the Breshit. I look at it on verse 126, when God when God is Elohim, it's in plural, and God's made the earth, right? So it's interesting. I just came across, never noticed it before. And 126, Targum Yonasan paraphrases. And God said to the ministering angels who had been created on the second day of creation of the world, let us make man. When Moses wrote the Torah and came to this verse, which is in the plural and implies that there is more than one creator, he said, sovereign of the universe, why do you thus furnish a pretext for heretics to maintain that there's a plurality of divinities? Right, God replied. Whoever wishes to err will err. Instead, let them learn from the Creator who created all. Yet when he came to create man, he took counsel with the ministering angels. So God himself says, listen, you're not going to change everybody. If they want to, if the Jews are right, if we protect ourselves, the world will condemn us for protecting ourselves. If we don't protect ourselves, the world will condemn us for, no matter what we do. As we know, United Nations will pass one or another resolution, tell us how wrong we are. So we know. It is disappointing that 193 countries in the UN voted to do a ceasefire, which essentially says, you guys cease and Hamas will fire. Let them kill you. You just sit on the beach and take the rockets. And the majority of the world, with a very few exceptions, thought it makes logical sense. It's a very bizarre situation that I like I said, when I watch Bennett whoever talking, I sometimes wonder, why doesn't he close his mouth and just says to the host, okay, what would you do? Just tell me exactly what you do. Do you have personally some magic bullets that can shoot and goes right through tunnels and kills these Hamasniks and everything stops? Do you have it? Give it to us. And just shut up. And they say, when you answer this question, we'll continue. If not, I'm gonna get up and leave. And yet, when he asks this question, the host, BBC host, usually quiet. So Bennett, whoever, just continues on. Well, of course not. Don't answer it for him. Just wait until what he said. What exactly would you do? That's what I think we're missing. But even if we did miss it, they still find there's, okay, like Rubio says, well, what's your next point?
Yeah, but one of the things that I find so bizarre and ironic is it was the UN vote back in '48 that gave us so much hope. It inspired Ben Gurion to declare the state, and it was the impetus for us to become a nation. And now we're overwhelmed by the anti-Semitic quality of the UN that we are trying to get the world to ignore these votes. I mean, it's ironic, and I don't know how to reconcile that.
Well, I think there is a way of reconciling that. Torah teaches us from the time of Egypt that society will accept us and even love us, and then we will grow powerful, and then they will turn against us. And that has been the pattern from Egypt all the way through Europe and all the way to the United Nations and today. And the lesson being that we cannot rely on others because they may accept us for a brief time, and then they will turn against us. And that's exactly the pattern we're seeing. Even after October 7th, we see that pattern in many.
More and more as I've gotten older, I used to try to make arguments why Israel has the right to their land and they have a right just like any other nation, blah, 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 blah. It never seems to convince anybody. I'm more and more going to what Rashi said in Genesis 1:1. Because he says Rabbi Isaac raised the issue. I'll just paraphrase it. The law book of Israel should have commenced with the verse, "This month shall be the first of months," which is the first commandment given Israel. Why then does it start with creation? Because of the thought expressed in the text, Psalm 116, verse 6, he declared to his people the strength of his works. That's as he gave an account of creation, that he might give them the heritage of the nations. Rashi says, should the people of the world say to Israel, you are robbers because you took by force the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan, Israel may reply to them, all the earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be he. He created it and gave it to whom he pleased. When he willed, he gave it to them. And when he willed, he took it from them and gave it to us. And I think that is the bottom line. I mean, I'm getting to the point, any leftist that says, well, you stole blah, blah, blah land. I'm just going to say, God gave us this land. When he created the world, he gave it first the Canaan nations, and he gave it to us. And he can give it to everyone he wants, anyone he wants, and it's ours. And the Rebbe spoke on this and said, as long as Israel stick together and as one say, no, this is our land, and God gave it to us, and we're not relinquishing it, the nations of the world would back off. But because there's so many Jews, I don't want to call them traitors, but they're confused, and they try to make excuses, and really Israel is so bad, and we don't like the government. If we could just get rid of Netanyahu, everything would be fine. It's like, oh God, help us, It's they don't know where the bread is buttered, This is really a spiritual battle, and we have to fight it with spiritual tools. It's like William Nichols said, you're trying to convince anti-Semites who are emotionally upset the logic. They don't care about logic, and it's the same thing. Here's a spiritual battle between us and these atheistic nations, or hostile nations. It's a spiritual battle. If we stand on spiritual strength, God gave us this land. That's the end of it.
Well, I'll give you.
They really have nothing to say. They won't hate us more. They'll respect us more.
Yeah, I'll give you an uplifting note on that, guy, so we're not as saddened and frustrated what's going on. I was in college. I was in my work like yesterday, and I talking to a guy who is IT department, computer department, completely secular, Chiloni, no keep on nothing. I don't know, last time he was in synagogue probably. And I'm talking to him, I say, Yaakov, how am I supposed to feel about it? I mean, I made Aliyah 7 years ago, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Are we supposed to be frightened? Are we supposed to be worried about how come all these nations doing it? I never saw anything in my life, and yet we're surviving. And he looked at me. He's a secular guy, and I was like a little bit worried, not worried, but I was really sharing with him a little bit like worried, like what's going on here? It's kind of unfair. What's happening? Are we in the right planet? I mean, what is it? And he said, Lev, the reason why I can't get it is because God is with us. And when he told me, I said, that's it. That put it together. Secular guy, no tefillin, no talis, nothing. He said, God is with us. And then he went back to his computer work because he said, okay, this is what I don't have to worry about it. I just might do my work right now. It's very consoling, very pleasant feeling to hear that. And it's happening. It brings us together. Hamas made a mistake. He united us. He brought us back together. He made us stronger and essentially not more indestructible than we ever been. And it's amazing. The more it's like the matter. The more you compress it, the denser it gets. The more solid it gets, and that's what's happening to us. Unfortunately, it's difficult times, but I think that's what we're undergoing. This reformation, that construction.
My son was in the Israeli army 3 years, full 3 years. He was infantry. Did commando raids and all sorts of stuff. So I asked him, so what are the best armies? Who are the best soldiers? He said, he thinks the Americans are the best soldiers. American army is the best army. I said, really? Well, who else is good? He said, the Russians are pretty good, but they're kind of depressed. If they weren't so depressed, they'd be better. How about the Israelis? They're second or third. They're crybabies. They're always whining. I said, so how do they win all these wars? He goes, that's how to win the wars. He says, when you're in the army, you see it. You see it. These little things that, how did we do that? Just, that's how,
Yes.
Jackie Mason said once that if you meet an Italian in the street, he'll pop you right in the nose. But if you meet a Jew in the street, he's as gentle as can be. But if you put an Italian in an army, the army can't do anything. But if you put that Jew in an army, it's the best army in the world.
Amen. Guys, we have about like 4 minutes left. Let's see. Very good discussion. Very nice. Our recording, as I mentioned, recording we did today live. Our 5 clubs, but asked me how come he wasn't invited, because we didn't even know it kind of impromptu happened. But I sent the email the link for you, so you might enjoy it. For the next Tuesday, every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, what topics would you like to discuss?
We'll let you know, I'll send you something during the week.
And also Harvard and Bob
Bob,
Cousin, if you want a particular
you're in
topic, let us know too.
Bob, you're in
Yeah,
Queens, New
yeah.
York?
Hi, your
What's that?
discussions are very entertaining and very informative and educational. And I thank you. I would contribute one little piece or 2 little pieces. I would say that the concept that I learned recently about monotheism, that Hashem has succeeded in creating a world where monotheism is very prevalent. We have early scripture talking about the God's mercy and such towards polytheists, towards non-monotheistic peoples, perhaps different set of rules pertain to how we deal with other monotheists. That was one little piece that came to mind as we were talking. The other thought is about damages. Let's not forget whose ox has been goring us and who's responsible to pay kofar for the damages that have been caused, and what the punishment for the murderous ox is his death, and the kofar for a muad is certainly full damages. So we should be looking to the UN and to Saudi Arabia and to Iran, to the people who've fostered this ridiculous scenario that the Arabs living in the Holy Land have some allegiance to the Holy Land. They have an agenda that was created by their overlords, and so their overlords now have to pick up the pieces and stop blaming us for their creation.
Wonderful. Would you like to expand on it next time, maybe, Bob?
No.
Okay.
I'll tell you, one thing I'm really interested in is, what do we do about Iran? Iran is the head of the monster.
You want to talk about next time, because I only have like 40 seconds.
Where do you live, Bob?
New York, New Rochelle.
Where?
New Rochelle.
Yeah, I grew up in Bayside, Flushing.
But our son and family are in Crown Heights, Prospect Heights. So we get to Kingston Avenue and we get to wave to 770 frequently. It's a lovely community down there.
Well,
good shopping, restaurants.
President of Argentina just went to the Rebbe's grave, so there must be something to it, you know.
Yeah, my grandfather is at that.
We only have 5 seconds, guys. Love you all.
Remember who.
Thank you, everyone.